They did it. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you. Try that again. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Michelle.
Mr. Poole.
Sorry.
I'd like to welcome all of you to what is the 10th annual Learning Conference, and as you'll notice that we've had a slide going, as all of you have gathered, that shows all the different themes we've had over the years, and so we thought we'd draw attention to that and really hope to kind of draw upon your memory as we build through and we create a new understandings of the conference today. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today and thank the team that was involved in putting all this together. It's looking like a great event for today. We have a special guest to help us open the event. Dr. Larry Grant is an elder from the Musqueam First Nation in Vancouver, an adjunct professor in the University of British Columbia First Nations Languages program. So we've asked him to open the day. So.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for the introduction, and good morning, everyone. CEM, Nasiaya, Ayasak Winasqueak, Tanitsin at Humasqueam. Glaxana, Shiwenel, Capalano, equal Timolto, because he looks to the Queen of Emignet, and because we eat to Sans Tomok at Humasqueam. Sleekwins, Ziatala. Ihilok Tom, Kui to UBC, Tanita Tom of Homasquam, sets it some net, Tanita to swallow. Hi, Tefka. Just wanted to say thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me here today to do the opening here at the educational conference. My name is Larry Grant. My Musqueam name is Ayasak, and my ancestors are Cleopalanok and Coltimilto. They were the ones that were here to greet the Spanish captain, Narvaez, and the captain sailing under the English flag, Captain George Vancouver. They greeted those first visitors with open arms. And today I would like to do the same and welcome everyone here at UBC on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Huntkameno Musqueam people. The language I spoke is, the continuum is from Point Grey to Horseshoe Bay, across the inlet into Port Moody, up into Kirkcudlam, and to Casey, up into Guideline, and then down along the south shore to Stewathan, and then back to Point Grey. And today, that's known as Metro Vancouver. But after colonization, even though we roamed that whole language continuum and controlled it, we are now contained in less than 200 hectares of land just east of UBC. And we are the people that have been here since the last ice age, approximately 9,000 years ago, and have lived on this delta all of that time. And today we live in Musqueam, which has been lived in continuously for 4,000 years. So that's who we are as a people, and I know it's a great institution to be in, but given the difference between 101 years and 4,000 years, and that it's still unceded territory, I would like to again raise my hands in welcome to all of you here today at UBC. And thank you all. Thank you.
Our The 10th Annual UBC Learning Conference has a theme of creating an exceptional learning environment. And this is, of course, speaking to the new UBC plan, which many people currently are looking to determine how do we look to that, how do we contextualize that for ourselves. There are 9 commitments associated with that particular plan that we're going to explore aspects of today. We thought that it would be a good, in one sense, to kind of ground us in where we are and who we are, to ask the elder to welcome us, to keep in mind our place within the context of this institution and where we go together moving forward. If you look at today's schedule, you'll note that we hit on aspects of the plan. So we have the various 9 commitments. The first thing we'll look at is looking at the concept of learning spaces and how that influences student learning. We'll also look to better understand issues around student learning related to class climate and intercultural understanding. We'll look at sustainability issues, and we'll look at Aboriginal engagement. Did I get them all in terms of that? And we'll close the day looking at some of the things that we've done in a lead up to this event, where we've held World Cafes, and we'll continue to do that throughout the year, where we're looking at that whole concept of an exceptional learning environment. And it is our hope that you, over the course of this day, get a better understanding of what your colleagues are doing on the campus, and how you might apply that in your own teaching and learning situations. And I realized you probably have no idea who I am. Did I introduce myself, Anna? Oh, I didn't. My name is Michelle Lamberson. I'm the Managing Director for the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology. And at the end of the day, we'll have the Academic Director of the new center that will close the day. We're kind of bookending the day. He's just gotten back from Istanbul. I believe his bags are still in England. So he'll be with us a bit later today as he tries to track some of those things down. It is our distinct pleasure to have also the Associate Vice Provost and it's Vice Provost and Associate Vice President, Academic Affairs, Anna Kindler, my boss, which I just had a career-limiting moment, and ask her to say some words about the day.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for your very kind introduction, and I would never expect you to remember my title. It doesn't even fit on a business card. So, well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to meet with you this morning and to welcome you to this 10th Annual Learning Conference. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are on the traditional Musqueam territory, and to thank very much Elder Larry Grant for his warm welcome. This 10th Learning Conference happens, as Michelle has mentioned, in a very particular context. In a context of the university having now its new strategic plan that its place and promise. If you haven't seen it, I would very much encourage you to have a look at the plan. For environmental reasons, we have printed only a limited number of these hard copies, but you can find the entire plan on the university website. And I really encourage you to have a look at it, because it has it not only states some of the goals, but lists some of the action items that university invites us to consider and see how we can contribute to the realization of some of these goals. The Learning Conference, I think, most closely aligns with one of the goals listed under the student learning, well, actually under the goals that are listed under student learning, which relate to, among other things, the need to consider or reconsider curriculum and pedagogy in ways that are informed by research and lead us to decisions about curriculum and pedagogy that are evidence-based and that give us confidence that we really are serving our students in the best possible ways. I think that the topic of exploring the dimensions of an exceptional learning environment very closely tie in with this notion. What we can learn from research, what we can learn from best practice that can help us create environments that optimize learning opportunities for our students. I would like to also mention another aspect of the context within which this conference is happening. As of July 1st, the university has brought together 2 units that have long been dedicated to support faculty members and academic units in their teaching and learning mission. The Center for Teaching and Academic Growth, TAG, which was so wonderfully led by Gary Poole, whom we have a pleasure to have today with us, and the Center of Learning Technology that was led by Michelle, were brought together in a unit, Center for Teaching, Learning and Technology. The idea has been that this closer alignment will allow these support functions, both on the side of consideration of teaching and learning paradigms, as well as ways in which technology can support learning at UBC. That this structural alignment can make it more coordinated and hopefully more effective and more useful to all of you. I think that the goals of Place and Promise and the ambitions of the action plan require a very strong commitment. The goals related to student learning, I think, require commitment not only at big university level, but very much at the level of an individual faculty member. And I think the fact that you are here today testifies to this commitment. You are here because you do care and because you want to make an important contribution. But I also wanted to assure you that there is a commitment on behalf of the university. It is a commitment to provide support to you on an individual level as a faculty member who interacts with students in their learning process, but also to academic units, to program teams, to departments and to faculties. And the new center led by Harry Hubble and Michelle Lamberson is well positioned now to provide support both at this individual and unit level. So in closing, I would like to, as I thank you for being here today and for your ongoing commitment to teaching and learning at UBC, I would like to assure you of our interest in providing you with the support and to welcome your feedback and your advice on what kind of support would be most helpful to you to help us refine the mandate and the work plan for the center as we move along. So thank you all very much. Thank you for giving me these few minutes to welcome the group, Michelle, and I wish you a wonderful day. Thanks.
Thank you, Anna. We're now going to move into the more, I hate to say formal part of the program because I'm not quite sure how formal we actually are today, although we are dressed a little bit better than we normally do, perhaps. But as we kick off this idea of an exceptional learning environment and exploring that, one of the really important areas that has emerged over the past few years is really looking at the spaces in which people learn and in which people teach. And we thought we would have a group of people come forward and talk about our learning spaces and describe how either they're using the learning spaces they have or aspects of the university with respect to how it is planning and moving forward with those spaces. In order to do that, I'm going to introduce Gary Poole, who is currently the president, or have you now just stepped? You are the president of the International Society for the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning. Gary has won an Excellence in Teaching Award from SFU and a 3M Teaching Fellowship. In his years at UBC, he has received 2 teaching awards, plus a Queen's Golden Jubilee Medal for contributions to higher education, and a Lifetime Achievement Award from the STLHE, which is the Society for Teaching and Learning in Higher Education. Gary is also an associate professor in the School of Population and Public Health in UBC's Faculty of Medicine and senior scholar in the Center for Health Education Scholarship. Gary, I'll turn it over to you.
There are only about 2 or 3 people on the face of the earth who can say all of those names and initials the way Michelle did. Thank you. My wife's another one, and I'm the other. So thank you. I appreciate that very much. I'm very conscious of wanting to make sure that the people who are on our panel today have time to express their important views. So why don't I just invite the gang to come up and take a seat here, and we'll get ourselves sorted and started. And while people are coming up, I do a quick head count. This is good. I don't think there's, we haven't decided. Have you guys decided upon an order? Great. This is how life gets exciting. As they're getting comfortable, I would like to thank the organizers of this conference for giving me a chance to moderate this panel. Some of you will know that my interest in physical learning spaces has been a real passion of mine for certainly about the last 7 or 8 years, after then President Martha Piper came up to me in a parking lot here at UBC and said, we need someone to co-chair the steering committee that's going to help with some of the design elements of this building. Can we count on you, Gary? There are occasions when people get asked questions for which there's really only one answer. And that was one of them, and that was just one of the greatest invitations I have ever been given, and the opportunity to have a chance to at least have some say in terms of some of the ideas that are being explored in this building has been an enormous privilege. So to be able to come back and moderate this panel, it just gets better and better. You have in your program short bios for each of the people on this panel. So I will not take up valuable time by reintroducing them just now. I will let you guys, how's this? When you take your turn, just make sure people know who you are so they can tie you to the bio, and maybe a sentence you want to say about yourself in terms of your perspective, and then I'll let you go to it. In terms of our structure for this morning, these folks have agreed to speak concisely for about 5 to 7 minutes, and that will allow us some time for discussion, question, comments before we finish this session at 10:30 and get on to really other important things happening during the day, other sessions and opportunities for you to talk to one another, which are all too rare. Does that all make good sense? With that in mind, if we started with Simon and moved this way, do you think it would all fall into place? I know it is, Simon, but and I know you too, so I'm not worried. Okay, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Do you want? Can everyone hear me? If
I think this is just a good thing to have.
All right. Okay. Good morning. So as Gary said, my name is Simon Neame, and I'm the assistant director of the Barber Learning Center. So I've had the pleasure of working with Gary and other members of the planning committee from pretty well the onset of the project. And I'll say just a couple words about, from my perspective, I think why I was asked to be on the panel, was looking at, various types of learning spaces. I'm coming from the library perspective, so my background is as a librarian and academic libraries in particular. And I'm coming really from a background of changing and evolving spaces in libraries and how library spaces are rapidly evolving to respond to different user needs. And one of the ways that's really manifested itself in the last number of years in many academic libraries is around the notion of a learning commons and the development of a learning commons. And part of my responsibility here is to oversee the Chapman Learning Commons, which is that beautiful space behind you and in the Heritage Core. But also the spirit of the Learning Commons really spills out through the whole building. So in some ways, this entire building is really a manifestation of a Learning Commons model. And what that really is, for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, is really thinking around space and services and integrating different types of space and services and working with a lot of different partners. So a Learning Commons is not a single entity, it's not a single group. It's really a coming together of many different groups representing different points of view, different services around campus. Looking around here, I see Jodi on our panel, and that's somebody that we work very closely with around our teaching spaces, but also groups like Student Development, Center for Teaching and oh boy, I'm having one of those blank out pressure moments, CTLT, and formerly OLT especially, and TAG, working with them around the development of services. So that's really my background, where I'm coming from. And I guess in addition to looking at how spaces are evolving, a lot of what we do is to try to see how space is utilized from a student perspective. I'm very interested in how we build community through our spaces, and that's something that we're very interested in doing here at UBC, partly because we know that around student engagement, one of the key elements is how students feel when they're here and if they're engaged in our space and our facilities and have a sort of a sense of community when they're at UBC. And the other element of this, in particular from the Learning Commons perspective, is how does the virtual space that we're developing kind of intersect with our physical spaces? So we're thinking of the virtual Learning Commons, our learningcommons.ubc.ca site, which was recently launched, an amalgamation of the former Learning Commons and the former LEAP site. We're very excited about that because it really represents the same idea in a virtual sense of bringing together different service providers, different services for students, and the student perspective into a virtual space. How does that start to interact with the kind of physical space, and how do those services play off each other, the in-person services and the virtual services? So I think that's an area that we're really focusing on and trying to evolve. But to me, over time, we have fewer conversations about physical in-person space and services and virtual, and more just about how we provide our services, what kind of community we build, whether it's virtual or in person. It just kind of blends. And I don't quite know where that's going yet, but I think it's an exciting direction and something that we're all going to be sort of thinking about in the future. So I don't know if that was 5 minutes, but I'm going to turn it over to Andrew next to me.
All right. Well, thanks very much to the organizers for inviting us all here, and I'm glad to be here. My name's Andrew Rushmere. I'm the academic coordinator at the UBC Farm and Center for Sustainable Food Systems, it's interesting to me having this be sort of the Learning Spaces panel. We often talk about the farm in terms of place rather than space, and from my own geographical undergraduate background, my own geography undergrad background, those discussions are always interesting to me, this kind of contrasting this notion of space as sort of the abstract mathematical conception of a kind of empty box that we can fill with things. And it could be anything, really, in a certain way. And that's exciting. That offers all sorts of possibilities in the right kind of setting. But often when we talk about the farm, we're talking about place in a very conscious way, as opposed to space in a certain way. Place meaning it's a very particular location. It's a very particular kind of place where we can do very particular things. And that it couldn't just be any place. We couldn't just do anything there. We don't want to just treat it like an empty box or like a blank slate that we can kind of raise and build a whole bunch of stuff there. This is a very unique place on campus. Has anyone been there? Oh, wow, that's a good number. Right on. Well, for those of you who haven't been, I encourage you to come out. It is very unique. For those who are unfamiliar with it, it's a 24-hectare piece of land on South Campus. You can see the little map there, just south of 16th, the star where the UBC farm is. And it's about 12 hectares of kind of cultivated field space and 12 hectares of forested space, roughly speaking. It's a whole bunch of ecological niches in between there, too. What we do down there is we focus on research. That's faculty-led research, student research, grad students, undergrad students, and teaching, and community service or community engagement. And we focus on those three approaches to basically study in the areas where food security and food system sustainability, health and more kind of holistic conceptions of health or preventative health programs, and environment or ecology, where the three of those things intersect. This is a place where students and faculty members can come out and do some very hands-on work. That's what's part of what's really special about it, is that there's a site right there, especially in agricultural sciences and in forestry, but really across all disciplines. Out there right now, we've got about 16, I think, of UBC's 25 faculty, schools, and colleges involved at the farm in in-depth learning or research in one way or another. And that really runs the gamut from sociological research and anthropological research, say, with some of the Aboriginal programs, community programs we have on site, to Faculty of Medicine, doing work on sort of improving honeybee immunology and figuring out what we can learn about human immunology from that, to more standard kind of field trials, oriented around varieties that will be useful in a sustainable organic agriculture system. So there's a whole bunch of different ways that people can use and access the farm. And it's a unique place in that, as well, we've got quite a lot of interdisciplinary work going on. Like I said, lots of faculties involved, but often those different disciplines are actually working together. They're not just all in the same space in their own separate things. They're working on projects of common concern. They're working on issues around climate change and carbon sequestration, or on issues of building a sustainable food system, or thinking about a diabetes epidemic or an obesity epidemic and how food is related to that, or thinking about how we steward land and how agriculture affects that. Thinking about how we do community development. Right, we've got a neighborhood being built right beside us. It's an incredibly unique opportunity to talk about how an urban type area sustains a land base that's adjacent to it, and how that land base sustains that urban area in return. And that's a lot of what we're proposing to do. Going back to the place discussion briefly, I think I've got about a minute left. There's our new academic plan that governs the site is called Cultivating Place. It's meant to echo UBC's plan called Place and Promise. And a lot of what we're trying to do there is ramp up a lot of our programming. We've got about 150 different initiatives out there, lots to talk about. But ramp it up with a focus on sustainability. It's always been the Center for Sustainable Food Systems. It's part of the Cultivating Place is part of the sustainability academic strategy. But really focus in on alternative energy, alternative building, alternative technologies, appropriate technologies. That's a big one for us as well. And then looking at climate change issues big time, that's a big one for us as well. And doing that in the spirit of integration. We're coming at this from multiple perspectives. They're very complex problems. We're not just doing it through one discipline. And doing it in the spirit of application as well. A lot of what we are doing applies directly to UBC's sustainability goals. We're hoping it will be applied on campus. A lot of it already has been. A lot of the projects the students and faculty take on. So that's how we're sort of moving ahead to the future, and happy to answer questions as the conversation goes along.
Thank you. My name's David Vogt. I'm really happy to be here, although I'm daunted by the prospect of saying anything original or worthwhile to a group of people that clearly care and know so much about learning and teaching. And I'm not sure I can do that, but hey, I'm here. I think one of the reasons why I'm here is that I'm kind of one of the people that's pushing the edges on the online learning environment as it pertains also to the face-to-face. And so I'm doing some graduate teaching programs on BuddyPress and WordPress, where everything the faculty and the students and everyone else says is open to the public, and it's largely student-led, and it's a heck of a lot of fun. And the simplest way I can say about what drives that process and why it works is it's designed around a single principle, and that is I want to create an environment where I, as the person that cares about the subject area, have the opportunity to be inspired and learn as much as I can through the activity of everyone else involved as I possibly can. And when one follows that principle that it's absolutely not sage on stage, it's about I'm the luckiest learner in the classroom to be able to set up this environment so that I can learn more quickly because of our collective activity together, that's a great way, a great design principle to move forward. But the idea that I wanted to seed with you that probably isn't in your head at the moment is that a current focus of mine, I'm mostly an entrepreneur and innovator more than anything else, but a current focus of mine is how much a learning environment is identical to an innovation environment. That is and I'm not going to describe both, but I want you to think about that in terms of what Canada's needs are at the moment. You can't listen too much to any radio broadcast to know that Canada is falling behind in innovation. Our corporate R&D is not keeping up. We're not keeping ahead on the productivity side. We're having real problems there. And the real problem there is about mediocrity caused by changing economic conditions, which is that large companies and small companies can't afford to do R&D because if you invest in a long vision idea, well, it has to actually go to market in 4 months. So, if you've got ideas, don't come here. And what large companies do now for innovation is they buy small companies. They let small companies do all the innovation, take all the risk, and then they buy them. That's the current innovation practice in the large company world. The problem is the small companies, the startups, have an equal problem with mediocrity in that what I call the Dragon's Den culture of quick fix entrepreneurship. It's all about widget stuff. You create a little gizmo that you can sell. That's not a big idea. That's not going to change the world. There's nothing transformative or excellent about that. And if you're an entrepreneur out in the world, that is what you're faced with now, is that you have to create something that's going to market very quick and flashy and get it out of the way. And so what I'm saying is, I believe Canada's future in innovation actually rests here, and that's a dramatic change for me over the last 4 or 5 years, to think that universities can be great innovation environments as well as good learning environments. And I'll tell you right now, we're not a good innovation environment. We're actually really, really poor, but that's a cultural thing rather than an actual reality about what we're doing. And so my big mission now is actually to couple the development of our learning environment with our innovation environment, and I actually believe the two of those are going to be immensely symbiotic for our future. Anybody who wants to chat about that can. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Judy Brown, and I'm an instructor here in the English department at UBC. I also teach courses in the Center for Continuing Studies and have taught courses through OLT. And I wanted to talk a little bit this morning just about my experience of learning spaces and teaching spaces, both as a teacher and a learner at UBC, and I think the two keep feeding back into one another. I was a student here. I've been a teacher here for about 38 years, which is a drop in the bucket in comparison with the Musqueam connection to this land or the presence of UBC as an institution on this land. But I can say that I can think back to my first years here at UBC as a place where learning spaces were fairly medieval, if I can use that term in the sense of their design. We would spend most of our days watching the backs of our classmates' heads as we sat in fixed seating in classrooms, watched instructors write on the board with chalk, and sometimes the board was not visible because it was so dusty. I have in my own memory the experience of teaching large lecture sections where students in wheelchairs were relegated to the space behind the class and behind a screen because they didn't have access to the room. So those students were physically separated from the rest of the learners in the class. And I can remember not too long ago that UBC was a place that certainly welcomed right-handed students, but left-handed students would have a very difficult time finding a place and a space in which to do their writing in the classroom. So that was the past, and I think a lot of learning happened maybe in spite of the space that we had rather than because of the space that we had. I think today in our classrooms, I wanted to talk about two experiences that I've had, one having to do with face-to-face learning and the other to do with online learning. I teach large classes and small classes in literature and in writing. And in the large classes, it's still a challenge, even though the design of classes has been revolutionized in a lot of ways in terms of technology being welcomed into the space. We still have large numbers of students sitting in fixed seatings in a lot of our lecture halls. But one thing that I've been working on in my literature classes, where I have 150 or so students coming in for lectures several times a week, is to turn the class into more of an interrogative space rather than a declarative space. And I'm using grammatical terms here, pardon me, but really I'm talking to my students about the importance of their questions in helping to shape the learning that we're doing in the course. And when you're teaching literature and when you're talking with a community of readers and a group of, in many cases, writers who are fairly new to the academic and scholarly and research practices in writing that we have here at UBC, it's very important for those students' voices to be heard. And for those of us who are teaching those classes to understand how much we can learn from student questions. So a lot of my lecture classes are begun with a period of time in the class where I ask students to pose questions in writing about what they're reading. Take those questions, go back and study them a little bit, and then use them to frame the discussion of the work that's going on in the class. Encourage students to start understanding that it's not just a matter of going to a lecture and listening to the sage on the stage, as David was just saying, but it's a matter of actually listening to one another. And very often in the classes that I do teach that are in the large lecture format, I'll explain to my students that their questions will actually be driving our writing in the course. So in many cases, the kind of writing that they do will come out of a selection of questions that the students are asking, and their examinations in the course, so that those voices are being acknowledged, that we're genuinely understanding how much students have to contribute to the discussion and the reading of literature and the kind of writing that they're doing in literature and writing courses. I've also learned from watching the teaching assistants that I work with in these large lecture classes, visiting their classes, and watching how they're breaking up that fixed space by moving students into learning circles and having classes consist of discussions that go round the room with every student contributing a question, an observation, a passage that is of importance to him or to her. And those are very energetic and lively classes as they're proceeding. The other experience that I've had is a really fortunate experience in the last sort of 10 years or so of developing online learning space with the assistance of the wonderful wizards in OLT under its former name. This is to develop a writing intensive course in business and technical writing for third-year students here at UBC. And that course is fully online. It involved a steep learning curve for me and for my co-authors in the course, thinking about how to develop materials for that environment, how to produce an environment that was intensively interactive, and that gave students the opportunity to really develop their writing skills during the course. And what we've really emphasized in that course is scaffolded learning, where each one assignment in the course feeds into a subsequent assignment. And all the way through the course, the students are being encouraged to reflect on what they have been writing. So major assignments are also accompanied by a short reflection piece on what they've learned and what they've, what they've encountered as an obstacle in that particular writing experience in the course. And the most important element of this course, in my view and the view of the co-authors and those who've taught the course, is something called a portfolio assignment. So many of you may be, aware of the portfolio as it's used in different venues. In this writing course, students at the end of the course are asked to select 4 of the 12 assignments that they've done in the course. So to choose 4, to develop a rationale for their choices, so to explain why they've chosen those pieces, to contextualize them by writing a head note or an introduction to explain when the assignment was done, what its purpose was, and what sorts of issues arose for those students in working through the assignments. And then to design a portfolio that they then submit for evaluation at the end of the course. So they're selecting work that they have already, worked through in a first draft and doing revisions, and then explicating for another audience and also for themselves why they would value these 4 assignments over others. We also weave this into our final exam so that one of the final exam questions has to do with what students have learned through the portfolio and reflection learning process in this business and technical writing course. The feedback from the course is very positive from the students who are taking it. My role as a teacher in an online course is a little bit different from what I'm used to. I'm used to much more sort of face-to-face interaction with students. But I find when students have to communicate with me and with others in writing, there's a kind of permanence in that. The kinds of questions that they ask are really well thought through. The kinds of answers that they provide to one another and that they provide themselves are really, they're probably less fleeting, less ephemeral than they would be in a classroom where we're exchanging ideas face to face. So, that I've had the privilege of really being able to work in a number of different ways in my teaching in my years at UBC, and to really see a change for the better in the number of different ways we're creating spaces, and I think, getting back to what Andrew said, places, not just spaces, where students can do their learning and really feel as if they're contributing in a way that they might not otherwise have felt 38 years ago when I started here as a student. Thank you.
My name is Jodi Scott, and I'm the manager of formal learning at Classroom Services. And really my focus is on the space, the actual classrooms that we still do most of our teaching. And I thought that what I'd like to focus on is some of the spaces that we've built recently that actually are part of the change that we're trying to make in our classrooms, which is to really allow for more interaction. So I wanted to show you some spaces that are a more traditional layout, but that allow for interaction between students and between instructor and students and instructor. Because I think this is definitely what we're hearing is needed, and it can be more of a challenge in larger spaces, especially our tiered theaters. So the first one that I'm showing you, I just want to give you an overview of some of the spaces that we already have on campus, because I think that sometimes people don't realize that we have tried some new things, and this is an opportunity for you to see that these spaces are here, and moving forward as we design new spaces, we're looking for even more of this interaction. So this is Wood 6. It's 180 seats. This is one of the first places where we tried what we're calling the pods. So we have 14 sort of breakout spaces. The idea was that within the theater that there would be able to be group work done. If you try the next slide. So this just shows some of the students gathering around. In this case, we're not sure how successful this is. Our understanding is that many people that are teaching in this space aren't using this. So what we really need is feedback from from instructors and from students about whether our spaces are working, so we know whether this is a direction that we want to keep going. Next slide, please. This is Buchanan. So this is Buchanan B. There are 4 theaters like this. It's very traditional. There's a front of classroom, but what we've tried to do here is go with 2 rows per tier, which would enable people to turn around and speak to the students behind them. So there's an opportunity here for group work, but it still meets our seating capacities, which is definitely a consideration when we are designing spaces. If we try the next slide. This is the same type of thing, 2 rows per tier, but with tablet arms. And this is the first time we've tried this on campus. The first row swivels, so completely around so that you can speak to the people behind you. This theater is Buchanan A. It's 180 seats. If you show the next slide. So this is this fall. This just opened. This is a math class taught by Mark McLean. And he allowed us to come in and show how he's using this, and you can see that there is a lot of interaction there, but still the opportunity for him to do a lecture style if that's what he chooses. The next slide. This might be familiar to people in this building. This is Ike Barber 182. What I wanted to show was that what we're trying to do when we design the theaters now, the tiered spaces, is to allow instructors to move around so that in the front of this, there's actually, the seats are taken out and the instructor can walk up, make better eye contact with students, this theater has fixed tables and swing-away chairs, which means that there is still another opportunity for students to turn, speak to other students. So this is another design that we've tried here. Next slide, please. So this is another room in Ike Barber. It's a parliamentary room. This is an opportunity for students to see each other, have discussions, debates. Again, this is a room that we're not sure how it's being used. We've had very little feedback. We're not clear whether people book it because they like that style or because they need 50 seats. So we really, really encourage people to talk to classroom services. Let us know what you're looking for, what works, what doesn't work. Next slide. This is from the University of Southern California, and it's a case-based study room. And what they've done is they've shown how they could take a very typical business or law type room, and the next slide, and then they're talking about how they'd like to see sort of interaction happening within that style room. So we have that type of room being built in 2 new construction projects that are happening right now. So we've got solder happening, and we've got law, and many of their classrooms will be this type of classroom. And those classrooms really do allow for a lot of interaction, but still support the lecture type teaching that still has to happen in some programs. That's just an idea of sort of what we have. What I'd like to make sure everyone realizes is that we're working on a new learning space design guideline document, and it's an upgrade of a document that is used by planners and architects to guide them when they're designing our learning spaces. And we've tried very hard to talk to many different groups in the UBC community. We've been doing focus groups for the past month, but I encourage anyone that has an interest in how we're designing our learning spaces to please be in touch with us. Let us know what you want. This is an opportunity, and we hear what you're saying. We definitely recognize that we have many outdated spaces on campus. There are 340 general use classrooms on campus, so it's a lot to make changes to. But moving forward, we have opportunities, and we definitely want to hear what you want.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Alex Stout. I am a graduate student in the Department of Chemistry. I'm a 4th year, and as this, I've been a TA for first year classes and labs since the beginning of my course, and I'm also affiliated with CTLT. I'm one of the facilitators for the grad student instructional skills workshops. So speaking from a TA as well as a facilitator position, a lot of what you need as a facilitator or as a TA is just given to you. So in this position, I'm not in any capacity of presenting any plans but I can present a couple of ideas that went through my head. And of course, I have the luxury of not being bound by any budget with those ideas. So a lot of the, I think, needs that I see as a TA as well as a facilitator have quite impressively been addressed by Jodi just before me. So there is a lot happening in classroom services that is really, I think, facilitating necessary learner-learner interactions and student-learner and instructor-learner interactions, which Jodi also elaborated on. She's doing in her own instructions or lessons, lectures. So I think this is a great thing of having this infrastructure available. And then I haven't heard of this parliamentary room before, but I want to use that. That sounds pretty cool. So there's a lot of stuff, I think, given, but I wanted to share one thought that I've been wrestling with for a while now about learning spaces. There is not a lot of evidence about ways how to increase retention or increase or better learning in students. One of the few things that seem to be evidence-based and reach back to the late 70s seem to be that a change in the environmental context increases retention. So in plain words, a change in where you learn increases how you learn or how well you learn. So what I've been thinking about in this aspect is how can this change be achieved in a classroom setting? I mean, one way would be that classes would not always be in the same room, but they would rotate through rooms. But that's really a disaster logistically. So that wouldn't really work. So what other ways could there be? And I was thinking of there is this, and excuse my unprofessionality, not exactly knowing where this study has been done and who published it, but there was a study in a corporate setting, in a large office space, in an open office space, where management decided to just paint the walls of the office space, and I think they decided to paint it red because they thought like this will increase concentration, and indeed they could record an increase in the productivity of their workers. And after about 2 years or so, this increase or this jump in productivity has ebbed out again, and they were where they were before. So they decided to repaint the walls to what they were before, and they observed exactly the same jump in productivity in their workers. So what I wonder is it, and that's kind of a provocative thought, is it really important to how we change our space, or does the mere change help learning or facilitate learning? And I don't have a good answer to that, but I can think of a few ways how this can be implemented. Like, I mean, ways that are obviously easier than rotating through classrooms. One thing would be to put up pictures that can be changed. So I don't know, like art students could put up their works that they produce and then put them up in another lecture hall at another time. Projectors could project alternating pictures or just plain wall colors without having to go through and paint or repaint lecture halls, which I guess will be a financial disaster. Those are just a few things. Then, of course, there's the possibility of this all just being distracting and not reaching what the intention of it is. But I think with the few experimental or evidence that there is in terms of increasing retention in students or bettering, increasing learning, I think our thoughts have to go towards like how can we make modular or changeable space so that every instructor or even learner can make their own place out of it. So can make it more individual to what exactly they need. So really, might we just need empty boxes with a lot of high-tech equipment that projects things on the walls? I don't know, but that's just one of the thoughts that I've been having. Thank you.
Thank you.
not only invited the opportunity to do new things, but actually if you wanted to, you could still do the old things. The advantage there is those spaces are definitely going to be used. The disadvantage, of course, is that they potentially invite business as usual. They do not necessarily invite the kind of pedagogy that Judy was talking about. And to use David's language, they sometimes actually make us less impressive as a place of innovation. And then there are some innovations that actually make the old ways harder. If you want to have a look through it, it's on the ground floor of this building. It's the parliamentary room. It's actually harder to do old things in the parliamentary room. And that really invites the question, so what are the new things, and who on earth is going to go in there? Well, apparently some people would like to, so it's fun to see. We need to workshop those spaces. We can't just assume that people will move into them and use them in ways that some of us envisioned in computer simulations. This is exactly how the parliamentary room started, computer simulation from someone in theater. So thank you for these comments. It's not just about us as teachers innovating either. It's about our students going to those spaces and making the best of them and making the kinds of connections that Andrew and Simon talked about. A lovely collection of ideas. I'm sure you have some as well, as we sit in just one of the most interesting spaces in the university. I had an interesting debate with someone from the University of Queensland who's going through similar stuff where they have a space like this, and they won't use these spaces for events like this. This is student space, that's it. We use these spaces for events that we hope will make student life more exciting and their learning better, and indeed we invite them to come along. So even the space we're in is a living example of some interesting questions around our use of it. Your thoughts, your questions or comments for our panel? Please.
We really do hear you. And in fact, we've done some review in SCARF. That's one of the buildings that anyone that teaches in there knows that it's been a big challenge in terms of the seat capacities. So that's one of the things that we are looking at. There's many things that happen around classrooms, and there's so many different components to it when you're looking at design. Seat capacity is, I think, the primary focus for most people when they're looking. That's one of the reasons that we really wanted to try and highlight some of these rooms where we've tried some new things to make people aware that beyond seat capacity, there might be a reason to choose a room. We have a new website. We are trying to put better pictures up, descriptions of what we're doing. So the Classroom Services website has more information, and you're able to see sort of what is in a room. And one of the things that we've been trying to figure out around scheduling, which is a real challenge, you know, we have over 10,000 sections that we schedule into these classrooms, is whether we could highlight a certain room and have people almost like apply to teach in that space. what needs to happen is some of the construction projects that are happening need to finish so that we've got almost like extra space, because the way that our classes work, if you're trying to use those spaces and you have a smaller class size, then whoever needs that size could be looking for space. So there's many, many pieces to this, but I think that we recognize that what we need to do is to be able to offer spaces to people who want to teach differently. That's what we're trying to encourage. We need to understand, and then I think that that type of thing can be looked at differently, especially Buchanan A. That was one of the first, the Buchanan A with the swivel seats. We think that nobody really realized what they were getting when they booked that room. But some people are excited about it, and they're really using it, and so that's really encouraging to us. But again, I think there is a whole communication piece that we're working on, and this is part of what I was hoping to do today, is just make people aware that we have these spaces. In terms of actual size of the tables per student, again, there are challenges when you move from tablet arm to a fixed table and chairs, which is where we're trying to go. We hear that students really dislike the tablet arms, but you lose seating capacity, and so there's a balance, and sometimes the rooms seem a lot more crowded. The new guidelines will have really specific information about that, so moving forward, we know that we have opportunities, but it's taking those sort of very traditional old classrooms and trying to upgrade them in a way that makes the most sense, keeping seat capacity and keeping our student comfort and our instructor comfort. There's many things, and it's a challenge. We recognize that, and we hope we're on the right path.
Thank you. If you go, Jodi makes mention of the photographs of the various learning spaces that we haven't, and if you haven't done that, do that. When I used to work with instructors, especially our young instructors, I used to say, have you gone to the room you've been given? Have you looked at it? Can you imagine yourself teaching in it? Where are the pillars? You know, that kind of thing. And I mean that literally, not figuratively. And if the other thing is, if you just go to the web and just put in learning spaces, it's unbelievable what's going on there. This will give you some new ideas. You take them to people like Jodi. In my experience, classroom services have been extremely receptive to new ideas. So here we go. Joanne.
Thank you for very interesting presentations. My imagination has been caught by the idea of personalizing instructional spaces. I've taught in a number of areas, and it's quite impossible to get over the blandness or impersonal feeling within the classroom, which is something that I think contributes to a learning space. So as I'm sitting here thinking, I'm wondering whether it's possible to have, I don't know, something like unfolding panels that one could project. I would like to see a space where I could have a concept map that can be added to for each class by students coming up and participating on it, or that I can leave up on a screen while I'm doing other things within a classroom. And that means some things that are more flexible. Like, I don't want just another projector. I want something that I might be able to actually physically pin stuff to. So those kinds of things to personalize the space so that it goes beyond just being, Buchanan 120 or Chemistry 144. So I find that idea very intriguing, and it really resonates for me.
You know that technique, but if you point at a speaker, it stops speaking back. Thank you, Joanne. I come to this side now. Any thoughts from, please.
Yeah, I definitively support that idea, teaching in Buchanan. If it was just changing the color of each room, putting a little bit of strong color. I know I discussed with some of you before, and using oily paint is expensive and hard to fix after the students have done some damage to it. But I think, Buchanan could definitely, it's nice, new, but the color setting could definitely make a big difference there.
Thank you. Any thoughts on that?
I hear that. There's, I think in Buchanan we actually started bringing in more color as we went through the Renew project. So D, very colorless, a little bit better in B, A, more color again. There's debate around whether there should be color in classrooms. There's been quite a bit of discussion about it on the SCUP website, and we've been encouraging color. There's some, depending on if you're doing video conferencing, that can be a bit of an issue, but we try and do a color, we've been asking for in our new buildings some color. They tend to say, let's keep it at the furniture level. That way, you know, you might have a colored chair or maybe your desk, but there's a couple things. We've been encouraging people to do some kind of even basic, maybe even a tone-on-tone design on some of the walls, just to sort of add some interest. I think there are opportunities. It is a balance between an architect's vision and what we think will work in a classroom without making it very dated. I'm not sure that painting is a terrible idea. I think it's a great idea, and I don't think it's that expensive. I think that is the kind of thing we should be looking at. I would call that a challenge more than a big problem, you know, in terms of budget. So we hear this. I've been asking for color in the classrooms. It's a bit of an uphill battle, but it tends to be more around the fact that the color schemes are usually very beautiful and almost spa-like. So wood, white, and maybe a bit of darkness. And it's hard to find a color that people really would agree represents everyone. So I hear that, and we're trying to figure out how to make that work.
There are spaces on this campus that are inhabited by the learner. One example would be Science 1, another would be Arts 1, certainly historically here. Those spaces are beautiful, but not because of their design, and interior designers probably wouldn't, well, they might call them beautiful, but not because of the colors, but rather because the students have moved in. And I invite us to think about that as well. I think that's also in Joanne's mind when she thinks about, can you give me can you give me a space that allows me to make it distinctive for the learners, in addition to each room being somewhat different. And that gets messy, but it's a beautiful mess. Other thoughts? Please.
I think this is a comment for David. I teach exclusively online, and the digital space is, in Vista, extremely bland. There's no red paint on the walls or swiveling chairs or whatever. And I read your bio about the social networking you're doing, and I always regret that to enter into the learning space, you need to go through the CWL portal, which is this narrow gate, and then you have this very controlled, restricted way that you can, I mean, we can define some ways that students can interact. But what about all the social networking spaces, and how can we not make that CWL gate control the learning environment, and how can we open it up? And in addition, how can we invite the community, have our students working with the community and have it be more of a continuum rather than a strict, here you have now entered the ivory tower approach.
Thank you for that. Vista walls do not a prison make. I think the whole point of what I've been doing for the last, I don't know, Jeff, I don't know if Jeff is still here, but at least half a dozen years is we've avoided Vista. We've taken the course completely out of that. We've actually made the learning feast a movable one, and so the students actually create each week in a different free open platform that's there, which changes the color of the walls, changes all of the features, and they populate it and make it amenable to all the other students to come and welcome them into it. And then the next week we go on to another one. And the virtual world has enormous numbers of places, again, that are totally free, that are immensely capable of welcoming learners joining together, and with all kinds of different attributes and affordances and so on. So, yes, I leapt out of Vista for exactly the reason that it is bland, it is fully contained, it is perhaps useful for the instructor, but not useful for learning. And so I applaud that. I hope I haven't said anything really bad about where we're going with our larger university platforms, but the ability to link together open source, free, and other kinds of web instruments which are rapidly evolving is a really inspirational way of creating learning. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We've come to the end of our allotted time for this session. This is, of course, the beginning of conversations. That's exactly what the Learning Conference is supposed to be. I invite you to continue these conversations among yourselves and also with panelists and others. Please join with me in thanking the panel for getting us started so well. I thought so.
That's what pillars are good for, to hide. We're moving now into a break, and we'll start up again at 11 and bring your limber up a little and get ready for some really interesting approach to better understanding and getting better intercultural understanding as well as class climate issues. So we'll see you back at 11, and there is coffee and good stuff to the right. Thank you.